Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Webinar Wednesday. As you may have noticed, this is entitled Hiring for Engageability. This is obviously a topic very much definitely ripped from today's headlines. I can tell you here at Employers Group, not a day goes by when on numerous occasions we're not addressing the question of just what engagement really is, as we usually do when we're considering such lofty and such complex issues. We called upon the top experts in the field. And that, of course, would be our good friends at Engage to Excel. Engage to Excel Recruitment has been very well known to Employers Group members and clients for, I think it's somewhere around 20 years now, known as Decision Toolbox. A lot of you may remember Engage to Excel as Decision Toolbox. So not only do we get to share time today with Engage to Excel, but they are actually bringing in the big guns. Our presenters today, Mr. Darren Findley, who is the President of Recruitment Solutions at Engage to Excel, and Jeff Gelinas, the Vice President of People and Product at Engage to Excel. And Darren brings over 32 years of recruiting and staffing solutions experience to us this morning. He leads the Recruitment Solutions team at Engage to Excel, and Jeff brings well over 15 years of both HR and staffing experience and a passion for improving the employee experience. And the experience, and I think this goes for both Jeff and for Darren, really gives them the perspective to drive strategy. And you can certainly see how that's going to tie into our topic today. And so thanks so much for joining us. And now it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Jeff Gelinas. Jeff, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So I think to kick things off, I think it's a great idea to talk about employee engagement and to define it. It's certainly a buzzword, and there are many definitions out there. In our definition, at Engage to Excel, we talk about the extent to which employees are motivated to contribute to the success of the organization and are willing to apply discretionary effort. I think a lot of us are here to understand, what is that secret sauce to create an environment where employees are inclined to apply this discretionary effort. But we have to remember that the people that we hire are all inputs to that environment. And so hiring strategically with engagement in mind becomes really important today. Enthused and motivated candidates become advocates for your organization and engaged and productive employees. So certainly this is a topic that is near and dear to our hearts at Engage to Excel. And it is also certainly an impact on business outcomes as well. So some of the facts from a recent PwC study, company with highly engaged employees enjoy 33% higher profits, also 51% lower turnover with satisfied employees, which again lowers your regrettable turnover. And you also have an increase in performance-related business outcomes by 2.5 times, 27% lower rate of absenteeism. So just some really compelling stats around what employee engagement does to your business. And so again, this will be a focus for us not only during the employee life cycle, but really throughout that candidate and employee life cycle. And then from a metrics perspective, certainly employee engagement has a direct impact on the business metrics, and that's been proven over and over. So when it comes to things like turnover, customer service, absenteeism, quality and safety, there's a direct impact. And to go a step further, I think a positive or negative impact on any of these metrics in turn affects your business's bottom line. So if you think about customer service, for example, because I know that, we can all recall either a positive or negative experience as a customer in our personal lives, a disengaged employee today can be incredibly harmful to a business, especially when we live in a time where it's so easy for customers to socialize their customer experience via social media. So employee engagement impacts all aspects of your organization's performance. And one of the things that we talk about a lot at Engage to Excel is this concept of giving employees what they really want. And one of the ways that you can create an environment in which candidates, employees get what they want is through a framework that we have called respect. And we're fortunate to have worked with Jack Wiley. He's our Chief Scientific Officer at Engage to Excel. And for the last 30 years, he has been asking the question, what do employees most want from the employer in which they work? And it turns out that 98% of what employees most want can be summarized in this acronym, RESPECT. And it stands for recognition, exciting work, security, pay, which is really more towards fair pay than the actual pay amount, education and career growth, conditions, both positive, working and social conditions, and then truth, primarily from senior leadership. Not surprisingly, 25% of employees say that their number one want from their employer is fair pay, but after that comes recognition at 20%. So hopefully some light bulbs are going off, because this is really a blueprint for creating an effective candidate and employee experience. But as I mentioned earlier, as much as you have to create that positive experience, you need to hire the right people that are going to contribute in a positive way to your organization's mission. So a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to offer some insights around attributes that you should look for in candidates to make this framework more actionable. Darren, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about getting your TA strategy more engagement oriented. I'll let you take it away.
Sounds good, Jeff. Thank you. And just want to say how thankful I am to be on the presentation today. And I'm actually in California, so I feel like I should be with you guys in the office. And, I come to California for business quite often because of our Decision Toolbox legacy, but also come for the weather. And I want to apologize in advance. I've actually been here the last 2 weeks, and it may be my fault you're having this 100-degree weather out here. So I'm not really sure why it's following me around, but I do apologize for that. But beautiful area out here, and I love being out here with our customers and our friends, sort of employers group. So thank you for having us. As we think about what Jeff just talked about, when you go into and think about this respect framework, we're going to come back around to that, like Jeff said earlier, about how you can actually select for that when you're doing some hiring. But I wanted to start by just talking about some things in the marketplace that is driving some of the realities in the workforce that we're in today. And some of those realities are this labor market that is changing. And so since 2000, we've not seen unemployment at the rate as low as it is today. And everyone is feeling that across the board. It's really easy to see. At the same time, we're also feeling this impact of this labor market dynamic where you've got the boomers that are retiring or boomeranging. I love that boomers boomerang, right? And changing the dynamics of the workforce. You have the millennials that are beginning to increase in size as part of an impact on the labor market. We just begin to see the last couple of months how the participation rate in the labor market actually had gone up for one of the first times in several years across the board. So when you look at the supply and demand challenges in the marketplace, and you think about so many people are trying to hire right now, and you think about what's going on in the labor market itself, people are worried about having the talent that they need to sustain and grow their business. So what does that really mean from the candidate perspective? When you're at full employment, it means your recruiting strategy has to take a little bit different turn on how you approach candidates. It's interesting how we see today that AI takes a passive candidate and creates an active candidate when someone updates their LinkedIn profile or updates their resume on Monster Recruiter or wherever they have it out there. We have the technology today that gives us artificial intelligence that we use artificial intelligence to give us the data about when someone is thinking about changing a job. Scary, right? But we know that this passive talent is who everyone is going after today, and very few are actually active job seekers. We also know that when you think about the change in perceptions, and when you look at millennials versus boomers versus other categories, that having passion about what they work and what they do is really critical. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go to the next slide here. I want to show you just what the landscape really looks like. All right, so when you think about millennials and how they describe themselves, let's do this poll question now, guys, if we can. So I hope I didn't completely show the answer to everyone, but take a few seconds and look and see where you think the greatest gap between how millennials describe themselves and how HR professionals will describe themselves. So take a few minutes just to select one of those. Are they fun-loving? They see themselves as very tech-savvy, love the technology. They see themselves as very loyal to their employer, or they describe themselves as hardworking. You guys are on it today. So when you look at the poll results, we've got 5% said fun-loving, 27% tech-savvy, 36% loyal to their employer, and 32% hardworking. So either you guys are really on it today and know your market, know your millennials well, or you saw me go too far in the presentation. But C is the answer there. So loyal to their employer. So it's really interesting that when you think about millennials and how they behave and what their preferences are, they really do see themselves as loyal to their employer. So when you think about what's going to happen over the next several years in 2025 and this avalanche of change is going to occur, it's important that you don't wait till 2025 to have your strategy in place, because you really do have to begin now. We are seeing it across the board as millennials begin to manage teams that they've never had to manage before. They have to think about performance improvement plans. They have to think about having these tough conversations. They have to think about what it means for them to be in a leadership role in organizations and not just kind of in it for themselves. And so it's important that you go through and have a plan in place in advance of 2025, because at that point it's going to be too late, and you're going to have millennials comprising the majority of the workforce across your organization. So these differences in perception are interesting when you think about how millennials see themselves versus how typical HR professionals will also see themselves. And so I'm going to spend just a little bit of time going through this next 2 to 3 clicks, if I can. Here are the answers that we had, right? And then versus the answers to folks that are in HR, how they would describe them. So it's really interesting to see really the variances in how we in HR would describe millennials versus how millennials would actually describe themselves. You guys did a great job on the poll because you're actually spot on around what they're loyal to the employer. They do want that loyalty. And I think what you have to think about is that early on, I think about 5 years ago, we started talking about millennials and their ability in the marketplace to make changes, and in the workplace, how they're going to impact us all. We talk about how they would change jobs so many times in their career, unlike our parents. My parents. So I've been around 30 years in recruiting. My parents, grew up. They're all both born in the 30s, so they kind of grew up in this silent generation, or really the early boomer generation, where they stayed at an employer for a long, long time, and they stayed there for both. They worked for Southwestern Bell for 35 years and Riceland Foods for 32 years, and that is almost a foreign concept to most of us, and it's completely foreign to millennials. And so it's not that millennials are not loyal to their employers, but they crave more. They crave to learn. They crave to have an impact. And so being able to move into different roles to learn and have impact is critical for them. They would love to stay at the same employer, but they've got to be able to learn as they grow through that. So that's definitely something we need to keep in mind when you think about the labor market overall and some of those changes and how we begin to bridge some of those gaps, especially when it comes to leadership success. How are you hiring millennials with leadership potential? Are they going to have the ability to engage their team? Yeah, right. That's what we're talking about today, right? How do you prepare those millennials to lead and engage boomers? Totally different mindset from a leadership standpoint. The boomers are used to the hierarchical mindset. Millennials are much more used to matrix management, or it's not even matrix management, just individual contributorship. How can you prepare them for those things? And what are the attributes that you want to look for in those individuals in the organization? They're going to drive engagement, because we know engagement and engaged employees drives productivity, lowers turnover, lowers absenteeism. Those things are really important from a business overall. So preparing those boomers also to be led and managed by millennials. That's another shift. How are we going to respond to those individuals that have a hard time with things they don't understand, technology they don't understand, ways of communication that they don't understand? So we're going to have to put things in place to help bridge these gaps. So across the board, when you think about engagement, think about talent, I want to make sure that you're thinking about how to have these engagement strategies really before, during, and after the hiring decision. It's not just something you can be doing one time and done. It would be nice if our jobs were that simple, but we know they're not. So just think about how can you actually have engagement in your organization from a talent acquisition standpoint. How do you engage candidates and use some of the signs that we know drives engagement around respect, that framework during the pre-boarding phase, the selection phase, and even the post-hire phase. Got another question here that I'd like for you guys to take about. So if you have a few seconds, we've got the poll question based on 2017 candidate survey of over 1,500 job seekers. What do you think is the most influences them to accept job offers? We'll take a few seconds and think through that. Think about your experience over the last year. Was it fair compensation? Was it dignity and respect? Was it job fit? Or was it opportunities for career development? B.
All right.
Dignity and respect. How did we do? Look at that. I kind of led you down a path of opportunity, didn't I? Yeah. So obviously,
so it
all of
like
these things are important, but it's interesting that you guys kind of chose opportunities for career development based on probably what I said on the last slide, and I apologize if I led you in the wrong direction there. But it is dignity and respect. And the survey that we did, again, the 1,500 job seekers and their responses, again, all of these things are part of their responses, but having someone give them respect in the recruiting process, respect for their time, having a respectful interview, being on time, having your hiring manager show up when they said they would show up for an interview, all those things demonstrate respect for the individual and dignity for that individual person. So when you think about today how people communicate and you think about this pre-hire experience, so many times people are getting their information. There's so much more information widely available on social media, and there are a lot of influences on your brand. So we've not spent a ton of time talking about your employment brand. We'll expand on that a little bit today, but your employment brand has to be real. The experiences that people have are actual real experiences, and they communicate those. And especially when you think about millennials and what they do, they look at different things out there on social media that help develop and form and shape their opinions on you as an organization and you as a company, where they continue to buy from you or not buy from you. It's very important that those influences, whether it's from Yelp, whether it's from Glassdoor, where it happens to be, they're looking at what has happened with employees that have exited and with candidates that have interviewed. 48% of job seekers use Glassdoor. I mean, almost half of everybody that's looking for a job go to Glassdoor to see what the CEO rating is and what the other ratings are on Glassdoor. So social media is a huge influence. One of our marketing guys was talking to us the other day about his daughter. She's in New York. She's doing some internships at several large advertising agencies and did quite well, and super smart girl. She got 3 offers from 3 different interviews. And as she began to continue to research each of these companies, 2 of them had bad reviews, not only from exited employees, but employees that had interviewed and their poor interview experience. While hers was positive, others had had a very poor interview experience. Based on some of those things, she decided to go with the one that had the better interviews, the better reviews out there on Glassdoor and other chat rooms and things. So it has a huge influence on decisions that candidates make. So when you think about engagement selection, you want to look at some of the attributes that are going to help determine fit. But you also have to understand your company's unique engagement culture, and it's got to be real. You want to profile your top performers, so you know who you want to replicate out there in your marketplace or who you don't want to replicate in many cases. But you want to select candidates with the right attributes for success at your company. So whether it's behavioral-based interviewing that you're doing around competency, whether it's around interviewing that you're using to understand culture and cultural fit, You want to remove as much of that gut call as possible and look for past performance of those individuals. So you got to think about engagement impacts your turnover rate. So I want to also just kind of think about what 50% of employees feel valued. If they don't feel valued, we'll begin seeking employment in the next year. That's a huge number. So we want to help you think about, how do you hire for engageability? How do you create this engagement-enabled talent acquisition, and what that's going to do for you overall? You're going to see better quality of candidates that come through your funnel. You're going to have a better cultural fit, because the fit that they represent is a real fit. Real fit meaning that they know how to communicate in an authentic way the values of the organization. They demonstrate the behaviors that are consistent with the values of the organization. And then last but not least, you're going to have lower turnover when you hired for engageability and you have people that are the right fit for your organization. So let's talk about building that pipeline of highly engaged candidates. So what we like to do is use some of those things that we know that are going to help you create this pipeline of candidates and be efficient at the same time. I'm a lover of process. So the two things that I'm passionate about are process and candidate engagement. So having the right process in place that can be measured across your organization is going to help you understand what your needs are. Understand what those needs are will help you pipeline the right type of candidates and identify that talent early on. That'll reduce your time to hire. Having an engaged process and those candidates that feel engaged with you is going to prevent your superstar candidates from slipping away. It's going to be efficient, so you're going to improve your hiring ratios, and it's going to strengthen your brand as an employer of choice. In this competitive market we're in today, having a brand in your local community where you have operations and in the broader community overall where you have your business footprint, it's so important to be an employer of choice in those markets, because when presented with two competing offers, that employer that has a better reputation, that's more real and more authentic, is going to obtain and hang on to those candidates that are going to be the best ones. It's also going to help you create this state of talent readiness. If you know what type of folks you need to hire, you can begin to pipeline candidates in advance. We as an organization have been so fortunate to be a recipient of some of this science. And so when my team asks me what I'm doing in my spare time, I'm like, well, I don't have any spare time anymore. But when I do have some spare time or create some spare time, I'm doing interviews and I'm talking to people and I'm pipelining candidates for roles that don't exist yet today, because I know that they will. So the rate with which we're growing, as the way the economy is changing, the way the labor market is changing, I know I've got to be proactive. I've got to begin to engage candidates early. But when I do have needs, I've got instant talent readiness with individuals that are already excited and aligned and committed to the type of culture that we have. So what we try to do is just build in engagement strategies into each stage of the process. And this process flow is not going to be much different from the ones that you have today. It's pretty simple across the board. They take each of the steps in the process and kind of break it down really in a simple way, right? At a very high level. These are the things that you want to have in your process. And you know, think about in your organization, how do you build engagement strategies into each of these steps? So we're really going to kind of focus on, for the next few minutes, on the first three steps: the branding, the differentiation, the sourcing, the attracting, and the applying. And then Jeff's going to talk about the interview and selection piece on that and how you apply the respect attributes into selection itself. So I have to tell you, I became enlightened at a bowling alley. And this is one of my most fun stories to tell, because I had a problem. I had to hire 1,200 people. They had to be pharmacy technicians in a market that only had about 3,000 total candidates in it. So I ran the supply and demand. I knew it was going to be a tight market. Everyone was fully employed. And we began to have job fairs. We began to have radio and TV coverage, cable advertising, anything you can think of from a candidate generation, I was doing, except for one thing. I'll tell you what that one thing is in just a moment. Because I was having such a struggle generating enough candidates, I went to our IO psychology team. Said, I need help. I'm dying here. I can't find the quality candidates that I need to fill these roles. So we did a top performer study. In that top performer study, we were able to segment the top performing pharmacy technician candidates into 5 different market segments. So if you're familiar with Claritas or Prism segmentation, it's a way to divide the entire marketplace into 68 different consumer segments. And so we did the same thing with candidates. So when you think about marketing, you approach from a consumer marketing standpoint, these pharmacy technicians fell into 5 categories. So if you recruit pharmacy technicians today, I'm going to give you a hint. Here's how you go find them. I was spending $180,000 a quarter trying to generate candidates. It was a massive amount of money for a huge project to get 1,200 hired. It was not working. After we did the market segmentation, we found out that from a behavioral standpoint, from a psychographic standpoint, and what people do every single day, we're going to have to go where they hang out, what they do, where they shop, lifestyle marketing type of work. The pharmacy technicians fell into 5 categories. The only 2 things that were common in those 5 categories is they ate at Taco Bell once a month and they went bowling once a month. And I was like, well, great. What am I supposed to do with that? Have a taco party? And they said, no, but you should have a bowling party. So my IOs came back and said, you know what? If you're going to go find these people, you got to go where they are. You've got to go where they are. So we began having bowling parties. We spent $10,000 a quarter, generated more than enough candidates to fill all the roles at a higher level of quality, at a higher interview to hire ratio, and we filled these 1,200 jobs in about 8 months on schedule. So it was amazing to me, and what I learned from this experience is that if you listen to the data, it will tell you what to do. What it also told me is that individuals in this job category, they crave social interaction. So it was smart for us, and we didn't know it at the time that we were being so smart, but it was smart for us to create this place and a time where they could have social interaction with the leaders of the organization. They could develop relationships. They could meet them. That created this engaged community of potential candidates that once they came on board, they found that, hey, I knew this guy. I saw this girl. I met with this person when I was at the bowling alley. They're actually pretty cool. I like them. I want to work with them. And it created a candidate pool that was engaged from the day they started. So when you think about branding and differentiation, position your brand as against what employees really want. So when you think about respect and exciting work and transparency and the conditions at work, if you can take those things from a respect attribute standpoint, kind of flip those around and communicate your brand against what employees really want, you're going to find you're going to have more success at building awareness. You're going to have more success in creating this engagement and education, and you're going to be able to have this compelling reasons for them to come to work for you. But you got to also make sure that you're being authentic across the board. You kind of got to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly of the roles that people go into. Unmet expectations is a big detractor and it creates increased turnover early on. You also want to think about how you're differentiating yourself from those individuals in that same marketplace that you're competing with. Getting your team involved as well is going to help you with the burden and the heavy load. You know, recruiting is not just a recruiter's job anymore. It's not just HR's job anymore. It's got to be distributed across the organization because that's how you begin to take the values of the organization and live them out real life every single day. It's not just on the job, but it's also before those candidates start in those roles. So just a couple other things as we think about, you know, how do you get those resources aligned? You know, some of you are going to say, well, hey, I don't have an employer brand budget, you know, and we don't have any funding. And how do we work with that? So think about just your simple messaging that you can do without going out and spending $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 on an employment brand. You may find that $50,000 you're going to spend from an employment brand standpoint is going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in wasted candidate generation. But get your segmentation down. Understand that your messaging for one segment of your population may be different than the other segment of your population. And are you doing one-to-one or one-to-many? Find employee ambassadors that you can leverage. You know, have them be your touch points out there. I was at one of our customers that's here in Southern California just last week. And while we were there, they had actually brought in some of their social media influencers. And I was kind of, you know, that's foreign to me. I have to admit, I don't really understand all of that from a tactical standpoint, but they were giving them a preview of things they were going to do this fall. And then those influencers, they're not paid. They're just given some insight and some previews of things that were going to happen. And they went out and talked about it on their blogs and on their Instagram pages. They were these influencers. Your employees can be the same thing. Give them insight to what's going on in the business. Give them insight into what's happening in the future. Have them talk about what's going on as you're creating these career paths and this new development and as the business is changing. Have your employees become ambassadors and help them get through there. And then marketing department, they should be your best friend. I love our marketing department. They put some great stuff out. I have all kinds of crazy ideas, but when I do, they come back and help me be more thoughtful about it, and they actually can put some things together that communicate the things that we're wanting to do and thinking about doing in a very thoughtful way that communicates well. So make marketing your best friend in the organization. When you think about sourcing as well, you want to make sure that you have the ability to have these engagement-based strategies in place. So you always want to go back to my bowling story, right? Identify your top employers. Be able to define what good looks like in the organization. Optimize your job posting. So, from a long time ago, you think about keywords, and we all grew up in this world where the government requires us to have these very non-unique job postings. They have to all be standardized. They all have to be compliant. But think about how you post those jobs, how you communicate those jobs. Keywords is almost not a forgotten term these days because AI picks up so much more now than just the keywords. But you still got to build out these strings when you're building your Boolean searches for candidates. So think about what are the things around your EVP, your real culture, your real brand, and the job itself. Begin to create this job as a position of choice that works well with your employer of choice message across the board. And then prioritize your candidates based on similarities to these top performers and demonstrated interest in your company. So, when you think about the path to least resistance is one that's closest to you sometimes, right? Think about how you prioritize your candidates and your approach based on how they fit with your top performers and their demonstrated interest in your organization. So different types of candidates require different type of engagement tactics, right? So I think about it really in three big buckets, right? You got your employment branding, pretty high level of contact. It could be through newsletters, through social media updates, through feeds on LinkedIn. It's pretty high level. You're going to have an interested candidate pool, but then you want to kind of bring that in a little bit. I call these hot leads. These are followers. These are people who subscribe. These are people that have this medium level of engagement, so it's better than just a glancing blow. So they actually will read the things that you send out. They'll look at your newsletter. They'll be interested in updates in the organization. Those are some of your hot leads for your new hires. And then you got applicants. So when I think of an applicant, they're my star people, right? They're the ones that I want to have a hold of and have a very high level of engagement. You got to keep them warm. You got to have tactics in place that are much greater than just being interested or being subscribers. You're going to have one-on-one interactions somehow, whether it's with alumni groups, whether it's your current employees. We had one customer, and we found out doing the same top performer study that they had this culture of athleticism in their organization, that sports was a huge deal across this job family. So we actually started and we created these internal softball leagues. And so we would have one department play another department on Tuesday nights at the ballpark. But then we also started inviting candidates to come out to the ballpark to our softball games. We created one-on-one interaction with interested applicants, with our existing employees, and even some alumni had moved on and come back and wanted to play ball. But we began to create this interest and this attachment to what the real culture really was. And so there's a lot of different ways where you can create this one-on-one outreach through just understanding who those candidates are. And so once they apply, again, you want to build this engagement in your application process. I've talked a little bit about this, and I'm going to go through about 6 things that develop this emotional connection. Sometimes we always forget to introduce ourselves, really. We do it all the time by mistake. I do it all the time by mistake. I just jump in to what I'm going to talk about or who I'm going to talk with, and we don't take the time to introduce yourself. But if you think about those introductions, that's where you develop commonality. That commonality is what is going to create these individuals that are connected to your organization. So you can introduce yourselves and introduce your team members and your employees through different ways on social media. Always have a bio, use images, the face-to-face, and there's a lot of different ways and technology can help you with that. But maximize those talent communities and forums that you're creating to engage directly with candidates. That empowerment drives engagement 40% higher. And it may be that you're at a very high level with just interested folks, and you want to make sure maybe your engineers talk about some project that they're working on, or other discussions that are relevant to that industry that you're recruiting for will drive more engagement in those communities and those forums. Another thing you can do when you think about, how do you share exclusive content or offers? So this is pulled straight from, Marketing 101 from a retail standpoint, Retail Marketing 101 playbook, right? My wife gets these things from Bed Bath & Beyond, says 20% off. She's there, like every week, because she's going to use the 20% off. So whatever she can do, and she's highly engaged with Bed Bath & Beyond and Kohl's. Kohl's dollars, best thing anyone ever created because it keeps you going back. How can you think about how to share content or offers or have special events that will be able to help you engage with candidates even more and get them involved with you? So whether it's an on-site event, a bowling party, a tour, a grand opening that you're going to have, invite your candidates to be involved in something that's new or exclusive. And then, like we talked about, make them part of your team in advance, whether it's a company anniversary or a community event that they're involved in, or new product launches. Invite them to be part of that. Celebrate, this day in a life as well. So you create either via video, a realistic job preview, or actually one-on-one in your organization or a tour. Create this day in a life. What's it really like to work here? And let your employees tell the story. And then last but not least, you can always kind of hold some type of contest. Think about how do you create this mesh between consumer branding and employment branding and begin to create followers that way and engage candidates in that way. So just some ideas there, thinking about how you can get them interested and involved and highly engaged. So the next thing I want to do is have Jeff jump back in and talk about these attributes of highly engageable. So Jeff?
Thanks, Darren. And I think now this is a critical step where you need to make sure that you're selecting the most engageable candidates. So I think this is about, taking selection to the next level. Darren, when you think about what employees most want, which is respect, the key is focusing on how you can create an experience around these respect elements. And one of the things that we recommend, particularly for team leaders, people managers, but really for anyone, is to make sure that you're hiring the right attributes that are going to cultivate that environment of respect, because they're exhibiting the values those are the values that are most interested in by employees. So we have used that science to not only develop an engagement survey, but also an interview process that's aligned to these attributes. So when you're using selection science, you can select against the attributes of the high engageables, and you identify candidates who align with your company's culture, naturally have those attributes that are going to help drive employee engagement, and have past performance of exhibiting those behaviors. So what we've done is we've come up with attributes for each of the respect dimensions, and then built questions around these that you can weave into your behavioral interviewing process. So as an example, as you screen people, if you think about the pay dimension, you can probe into their past experience in aligning pay expectations, both when it went well as when it didn't, or by getting recent examples of when and how they recognized excellence within their last organization. How did they do it? What was the result? So these are just a couple of examples, but for each of these attributes, we've got questions that really feed into the whole process of making sure that you're hiring these highly engageable candidates. Now, some good news for all of you that are online for the webcast, we're also going to send you a tip sheet on how to use the RESPECT framework every day to give employees what they really want. So some really practical things that you guys will be able to start doing immediately with the tip sheet that we're going to send you. And Darren, I think we have another polling question, if I'm correct. Yep. So there's no right answer or wrong answer to this one. It's just we're getting a sense. Does your current employee onboarding program recognize achievement in milestones for new employees over the first year? So, inclusive of pre-boarding, maybe that 30, 60, 90 days, just getting a sense of where the audience is at. All right, well, looks like this could be an opportunity. So 67% of you say that your onboarding program does not recognize achievements and milestones in the first year. And some of the research that we've done, Darren, really, you mentioned, millennials and some of their preferences earlier. Research shows, too, that especially millennials really value early recognition. So if you haven't thought about it, certainly consider some ways that you can build that momentum early in the process. So very interesting.
It is, Jeff. So I think the next thing, I'll just hit the next slide here. Let's see. Again, no correct answer. That was really interesting data. But when you think about how do you engage individuals during the hiring and onboarding process, right? So you've gone through this engageability work that you've done to generate your candidates. And then now Jeff talked about how you use the RESPECT framework to select for engageability and make sure that those leaders that you're hiring have the ability to engage those candidates. But now let's talk about early on. What happens early on? And we know that, again, millennials and even Gen Xers to a large degree, they really like to have some kind of recognition during the recruiting process and even the early onboarding process. So a lot of times new recruits will decide to stay or leave in the first 2 months that they've started an organization. So a poor onboarding program will almost create an immediate sense of urgency with those new hires to go out and look for something new and something different in their field of work. And so you want to make sure that from an onboarding standpoint, you've got to do several things to keep them engaged early on. So having an onboarding program that's aligned with your mission, to understand the vision and understand the values, and to have people demonstrate through behavior what those values really are is so critically important. It also needs to include the specific nature of the work that's being performed. So when you think about an onboarding program, it can't just be those of us in HR going through a week-long program of PowerPoint over PowerPoint over PowerPoint. And that's what so many of our onboarding programs have become. And so, I don't know, I got some friends that are doctors, and I always ask them, how in the world do you get trained to do what you do so quickly and understand, how you perform in the roles that you've gone to school for so long, and now you actually have to do something. And I said, well, we just watch one, do one, teach one. And so when we think about also how you onboard someone, kind of throw them in the deep end of the pool, yes, but you have the safety net for them as well. Think through your onboarding program that allows them to be interactive, because that period of time in their employment is so critical to help them get from point A to point B. They're really at risk, and we've done studies across the board of where risk occurs of them leaving, and until they're at 100% productivity, they're at risk of leaving the organization. So for some organizations, that's 2 months, some it's 6 months, some it's a year. But if you polled your hiring managers, they'll probably say, 2 weeks. Yeah, or maybe 6 weeks. If they're in sales, they'll go maybe 2 years, to get the productivity. So it's really critical you understand how long it takes to get someone to productivity, and your onboarding program is to help them get from the time they accept that offer, or even before that, I would say, all the way to 100% productivity. A little bit different way of looking at that. So when you think about hiring and onboarding, you want to protect your investment and all the time and dollars you've spent on recruiting that program. So conventional onboarding programs, look like 2 weeks, and it may take 26 weeks or so to get them to full productivity, but keep employees engaged and motivated from the start as they learn and develop these skills to be productive. High engagement onboarding also means recognizing achievements and milestones. So when you think about respect and what employees most want, I always go back to, if your pay is competitive, your pay is transparent, you know what the market's doing, you can check that box. And you keep communicating that through your interactions and your quarterly reviews and things that you're doing, but then you think about recognition. And what does then that really mean? How do new employees feel like they're making progress? And so you can recognize them in each of these little milestones. Maybe it's the complete training, it's a 2-week training program, or they hit milestones in learning your values and demonstrating those values. New employees are going to see that they're valued when they're acknowledged throughout their first year. They're going to gain confidence. They're also going to build relationships with others in the organization. And they're going to begin to adapt and adopt a culture of recognition. It's really interesting to watch organizations kind of morph. They may start out just celebrating birthdays and anniversaries, right? That's a really easy thing to celebrate, but it is a celebration. It is a form of recognition. You kind of build that in as your baby step to start doing like formalized recognition programs. Then you can take it up a notch and start thinking about what's around our culture and our values, and take it up another notch and have it related directly to performance and celebrating sales wins, celebrating new recruits, celebrating new business milestones, new innovation in the organization. So again, you think about those things that are important, and your employees are going to benefit those across the board. So with about 9 minutes left, I just want to go over some key takeaways for you today. Pretty simple, pretty high level, but hopefully you've gained a little bit of an understanding of, engagement is really the key to maximizing discretionary effort, like Jeff talked about early on. Discretionary effort is going above and beyond what they would normally do, each day. And then secondly, engagement levels are influenced by what employees most want. We've talked about the respect taxonomy and that respect things that we know from all of our research that employees most want. And then how do your leaders deliver on what employees most want? So think about that. And if you don't have an employee engagement survey, or you don't understand how they live your values out, think through how you can help them and give them some tools to do those things. And then build engagement into each phase of your talent acquisition process. Building those relationships, being transparent, talking about exciting work in a way that's exciting and beneficial to the organization and has an impact on the organization is critical. And then helping employees succeed with this high engagement onboarding program where they're aligned to your values, they're connected with other employees as mentors and teammates and coaches along the way. Help them succeed early on in the organization. So it can be as simple as start. Again, I'm kind of a simple guy, so I have to think about how do I create these experiences across my organization to be impactful. Use science and use as much data as you can get a hold of. The data will tell you what to do. Science will inform you. Key is tell your story. Okay, there's a story with every organization. There's history. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly. But tell your story, but be authentic around that. And then also use respect. Use the science we talked about early on. Think about what employees most want and relate your EVPs back in a way that they can receive it in a way. And then think about how you teach them something in the process. All your candidates, all your new hires, they should learn something and get some kind of benefit by interacting with you. Learn something about the industry, learn something about your organization, or learn something about you. And those really critical things that will help you begin to create great employee and candidate experiences that will help you be successful as you go forward. So we'll stop there, and then if we have questions, we'd love to take some questions. We got about 7 minutes, it looks like, so I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Darren and Jeff, thank you so much for all the phenomenal information. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I want to toss a few of these out to you. I'm going to interpret them a little bit for you. One, though, and this makes sense in terms of our audience, is these strategies and all the different steps that you recommend all make a lot of sense. Do you have any recommendations in terms of scalability for more of the entry-level production-type employees who might be more, the hourly, closer to minimum wage type employees? Do you recommend a similar approach, similar strategies, all the same steps, or is there a way to scale that down to make it more appropriate to that position?
That's a great question. I'll answer it, and I'll see if Jeff has anything he wants to add in. But when you look at your job families, and you understand each of those job families, so entry level, your investment and your targeting and your interaction will be unique. And it'll be unique to their ability to absorb it and their ability to interact with you. So I do think you can scale it down or you can scale it up based on the type of role that you're in. There's a return, there's an ROI on everything that you do, right? And so when you think about this candidate experience, you want to think, how much of it do I need to automate? What different languages does it need to be in? When you think about manufacturing employees specifically, and then what do they do on a day-to-day basis? That science will kind of tell you where to go and what to do and at what level you need to scale up to or down to. So, yeah, I think you do scale it.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think this is kind of along a similar line, which is the example you gave, the bowling alley example, fantastic and really easy to understand. But and I think this is kind of similar in a smaller organization, in more of a production type environment. How are there resources for that kind of data? How do you figure out what are the places to go to? What are the activities to tap into? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we've done in the past. So you always go back to your top performers. And so when you think about the things you need to do first, your first step is to gather your list of top performers. And you'll have that based on what your leadership will tell you. And then secondly, you want to grab internally all of their demographic data and as much psychographic data as you can through the information you have in your HRIS, right? And so it has to be a very well thought out approach, because you're going to get into things like what they do in their spare time, their total family income, where they live, the zip codes that they're in, and all of those things. So that psychographic data will also tell you what they spend their money on in their leisure time. If they have 2 kids and a dog, or 5 kids and a horse, or whatever it happens to be. And that's the place to start, though. You start with your internal data, and then you take it to that other psychographic data and that segmentation. Claritas is the name of an organization that I use all the time that does this market segmentation for you. So once you have the data, you can actually go in and look at their site, and they can give you some ways to break that down into one of these segments. And it'll tell you more about the lifestyle marketing approach you should take.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful. And then I guess we move to the next step, which I think a lot of us found really interesting when you're talking about early recognition and how important that is, because I think a lot of organizations do kind of go skimpy on the recognition in the early parts of that, beyond that initial, hey, here's our new employee, let's have lunch together, let's celebrate them and talk a little bit about them, and then we kind of forget about them for a little while. So those early recognition opportunities, do you have some examples that you could provide to us of what might be easy to do recognition activities?
Yeah,
I can take
Jeff. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can take this one. I think just to even back it up a bit further, a lot of people are thinking about, how to recognize, employees, but in that candidate stage, it can really go a long way. And you might be thinking, well, what do you mean by that? So, for example, perhaps there are accomplishments listed on their resume that you can commend them for, or perhaps demonstrating positive behaviors during the interview process. A simple pat on the back can go a long way to feeling appreciated. As we mentioned with that earlier poll question, it's about respect and dignity throughout the process. How would you want to be treated throughout the process? And then during that pre-boarding stage, we gave the example of, welcome boxes, sending a welcome box to a candidate's home, after they accept. That there's that critical time between offer acceptance and first day on the job, Bill, where certainly they're vulnerable to other offers. In fact, we found from our research that 6 out of 10 people are going to continue to consider other opportunities if they don't receive a touch point from their new employer between offer acceptance and day one. So onboarding welcome gifts can be a great example to show just how much you're excited about having them on board and to create that first great impression. And then continuing to recognize the new hire beyond day one, during that critical time when, again, they're still evaluating whether they want to continue working for you. And that continues for several months. So those are just a couple of examples. But when we talk about early recognition, it really does start during that talent acquisition phase.
Yeah, I really like that one that particular example about the right after acceptance of the offer, about doing something, that touch point there rather than just, hey, we look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. I do hear, and I'm sure you guys hear a lot of stories about losing candidates after you think they've accepted the offer, and obviously they're out there on the market. They're looking for things. They're getting other offers, so you can never be too confident, I guess, until they're there, hopefully, and sitting at their desk or out doing what they're supposed to be doing. Great tip there. Final question so far that's come in, and I'm trying to consolidate a few of these questions into kind of larger, more general topics, but engagement. Obviously, that's our theme here, is engagement. Do you have some good practical ways that our participants, they can measure engagement in their organizations? Are there simple ways to do that without having to do big surveys? Can you walk around and get a sense of it? Can you look people in the eye and tell if they're engaged? Any real practical examples of how we can do that?
Yeah, no, and I'm happy to take that one too. This is Jeff. So you mentioned the survey. So actually, contrary to popular belief, engagement surveys are not dead, and they can serve as an excellent tool for measuring engagement. It's not to say that you can't have certainly ways of gathering feedback, doing simple, polling or pulsing in between the baseline measurement, but we do recommend at least an annual or biannual survey to help you establish that baseline. You want to make sure that it's rooted in science, and you want to make sure that you have access to data, normative data, to compare your results to industry peers and best practices organizations. So, happy to speak with anyone offline more about measurement, but it is, something that is, I think, paramount to, getting that initial baseline from which you can then determine where to go and where you need to improve.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, and I think this is something that we've been all on this bandwagon of engagement and what can we do and scaling it correctly to our respective organizations. So these are really, really helpful and useful tips. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close up the presentation for now, most importantly with a big, big thank you to Darren and to Jeff for all this information you've shared with everyone this morning. We really, really do appreciate it. Most importantly, thank you to our friends at Engage to Excel, Jeff and Darren, for a wonderful presentation. We really enjoyed it, and we look forward to reconnecting with everybody for our next webinar Wednesday coming up toward the end of August. Thank you very much, everyone.